In the world of literature, there is no other book like the Bible. Welcome to the wonder of His Word.
It's great to have you join us again. In our last session, we considered the Bible, how to approach the Bible, through observing it, through interpreting it, and applying it. We left you with an acronym for B-I-B-L-E, the Bible, Basic Instructions Before Leaving Earth. What we're going to consider in this presentation and this session today is dealing with the importance of understanding the Genesis record. Now, we know that from a scientific point of view, often there are Christian people who believe that science contradicts the Bible, or the Bible contradicts science. And then there are scientists who are atheistic, who do not believe in the Bible, do not believe in God, who turn around and say, well, the Bible is a book of fairy tales. We're going to be exploring some of those challenges because they are definite challenges, and we need to consider them. And therefore, we're going to look at the book of Genesis, the first book in the Bible, the very first verse. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Period. Full stop. So all the science, all the years that science requires to determine how old the earth is, in suggesting that Genesis chapter 1 is only 6,000 years ago, if you're going to actually use the genealogy that is given in the Bible, we believe that the Bible is a lot older than 6,000 years. We believe that there is a tremendous amount of evidence to actually prove that. And therefore, all the years and all the millennia of time that science may require in order from a geological point of view to test how old the earth is found in that first verse. And that is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, full stop. The rest of the chapter, chapter 1, takes us into a recreation, a restoration, or a creation on earth. The earth was always there. The earth was very, very, very old. And when we consider what Genesis has to say, we look at that first verse. Science requires three very important elements to test or to assess or to evaluate the genuineness or the authenticity of something. And that is, number one, science requires time. Science requires space. Science requires matter. Time, space, and matter is the field and the components that science requires in order to make an evaluation. Now, the Bible, in the very opening verse, gives us those three important elements. In the beginning, time. God created the heavens, space, and the earth, matter. There we have those three vital elements in the very first verse of the Bible, dealing with what science requires. And that is time, space, and matter. The book of Genesis is an intriguing book. It's intriguing for many reasons. One of the reasons why it is called Genesis is because it's taken from a Greek word, genesia. The word genesia in Greek means beginning. So it's very apt that the first book in the Bible of 66 books is Genesis, meaning the beginning. And therefore, in that first chapter, the second chapter, and the third chapter, God directly takes us into the creation of man. After all, we are interested in what really makes us human beings, not so. I think that for those of you that may have read about the Genome Project, where science has gone into the genetics and the genome, the human pool, the genetic pool. There's a great interest in people understanding their background through DNA testing that is done. Now, there are many, many organizations offering people the opportunity to determine where they come from, and many of them are suspect simply because the sample that many organizations use in order to determine DNA is not broad enough. The spectrum is too narrow in order for them to make a genuine assessment and evaluation of where your progenitors come from or where you come from. Now, when looking at the genetic system, the term genome, genetics, genealogy, and Genesis are all related. They're taken from the root word, which means beginning. Now we're going to have a look in this session in terms of how God's word tells us that God created the human species, the Homo sapien. The Bible says that God molded from the dust of the earth and the clay of the earth the human body, the anatomy of man. And as he molded that specimen, it was dead. It was lifeless. It was like a clay jar. And what happened was God breathed into the nostrils this dead matter, and dead matter became a living soul. There are three very important parts to the makeup of every human being, and you can attest to this as well. You have a physical body, you have a personality, and of course, you have a human spirit. Without a human spirit, you wouldn't be living physically. So there's the human spirit, the soul, which is an old English word for personality, and you have the physical body. Three very important components. Now, when God made the physical body from the very dust of the earth, there were certain elements that God used. He used carbon, he used oxygen, he used hydrogen, he used nitrogen, the four very important elements. But did you know that he used more than 14 of the 93 or 94 chemical elements known to science? He used 14 chemical elements that make up the human body. You can test this. You can go to any website, and it will confirm this, that the same components or elements that make up the human body also make up the crust or the dust of the earth. It was Erik Schlossen, a Norwegian scientist, an analytical chemist, who discovered that the same elements that make up the human body also makes up the crust of the earth. And as an atheist, he said he had no alternative but to give homage to the Bible. And Erik Schlossen became a believer and a Christian by virtue of what he discovered. Now, that's many, many years ago. Since then, science has come up with the fact that there could be 98 natural chemical elements that make up our human body. But they all confirm that the human body has very much the same chemicals that is actually found on the crust of the earth. Now, there's something significant there, and I'm going to leave it up to you to think and reason through that. But what is important, that when God breathed into this dead matter the breath of life, the spirit of life, not the spirit of God, the spirit of life was imparted to man. And when the spirit, which was metaphysical, non-physical, merged with physical matter, when those two converged, it produced a soul, a personality. And your personality and my personality is really made up of our mind, your mind and my mind. Your mind has emotions. It has an intellectual ability to reason and think. It also has the capacity to make decisions and choices. It has a volitional capacity. Three parts to the makeup of your mind. Have you ever wondered if your mind is part of your physical makeup, or is it part of your spiritual makeup? Well, it's both. There is much about your mind that can only be expressed through the physical component of the brain, the organ of the brain. And therefore, you cannot take a photograph of a person's mind. You cannot take a selfie of a person's mind. Aren't you grateful for that? That we cannot take a selfie of your mind, because we know exactly what's on your mind. But we can take a photograph of a brain. I'm sure we all have a brain. And if we can take a photograph of our brain, but we can't take a photograph of the mind, and we know that we have a mind, there must be a difference between the brain and the mind. The mind uses the physical organ of the brain to express itself in the physical world. And therefore, when the brain no longer can function or physical death occurs, the mind is still intact. You still have the ability to have emotions, because that's not just physical. You still have the ability to reason, because that's not just physical. You have the ability to make choices, because it is more than being physical. There's a spiritual component to it. So we need to know that there's a continuity of life, that when we discard of our physical body that no longer can sustain our physical life, we in actual fact have a spiritual body that God has designed, that spirit of life, whereby we can express our mind and our personality through another agent, and that agency is the human spirit. Now, I want you to consider those concepts because that's very, very important. There are many, many people who have had great difficulty in coming to terms with this fact. But isn't it remarkable that in the opening chapters of the book of Genesis, we are introduced to three very important elements that science requires: time, space, and matter. We're also introduced to the fact that we are made up of a trichotomy. A big word, trichotomy. It simply means we're made up of three parts. So there's more to you than your physical body. Some of you may be faced with some physical challenges, but remember that beyond those physical challenges, you exist, because there's more to you than the physical matter that everyone places so much emphasis on. You have a mind, and that's who you really are. You are made up with a mind, body, soul, and spirit, but the real you is your personality. And that's what we want to consider in this session today. And I hope that what I have to share with you now is going to be helpful. If you and I are made up of a body, a soul, and the spirit, but the real you and the real me is more than the physical and the human spirit, and that the real you and the real me is in actual fact found in the soul, the personality, the mind. Have you ever wondered why some people cannot go on holiday? They can never relax. They can never chill out. They're always stressed. The reason why, wherever they go, they have to take the mind with them. If they could only take the mind, put it into a little box, and put it away in the cupboard and say, bye-bye mind, I'm going on holiday, they could have a tremendous holiday. But unfortunately, they have to take the mind with them. And wherever you go, your mind travels with you, because you are made up with those vital elements, such as having a mind with emotions, intellect, and will. Much that is being stored in your subconscious, which is a mental thing, subconscious, not in your brain, but in the subconscious of who you really are, is the journey that you've embarked on. And some of you have faced some of the most awful incidences in life that you feel has shaped who you are today. Don't be discouraged. Don't allow the circumstances of the past to damage your future and the present. Remember that the real you is found in your mind. The real you is your personality, your soul. And God is interested in your soul. He's interested in working in such a gracious way that you can begin to live a quality of life despite some of the physical challenges that many of us have to endure. So I trust, until next time, that we will be able to take this a little further and begin to take another step on the journey of life and explore the wonder of His Word. Thank you for joining us.